Before we begin today, a brief content warning. One of the episodes we're going to be discussing today is the Season 6 episode Tithonus, which does contain discussions of suicide and self-harm. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I think we're out of news again.
It's been a slow few months, really, hasn't it?
Yes, I mean, to be fair, outside of a new book, a new comic, a new game, which that one feels like a real unlikely one. Could happen, but unlikely.
We do have the book coming in July. That's Claudia Gray's Perihelion.
Yeah, unless there's some news about the reboot or... Well, I think the reboot's the most likely news source we're going to get anytime soon. Except for weird revelations about country and western songs in episodes from 1999.
I haven't even heard much news about the fan event at Saratoga Springs for a while.
Huh. I guess everyone was hopped up on the anniversary rather than the general thing.
Hopefully they'll reveal some more guests or something shortly, just so we can kind of talk about it here.
Yes. Let's talk about nanomachines.
That's a more opaque segue than you normally do.
I really can't segue into this. How can you segue into this one other than... Do you remember Lost? That wasn't nanomachines, but this one is. So we're going to talk about SR-819, or SR-819, I think they say?
819.
819. Directed by Daniel Sackheim, and written by John Shaban. Shaban!
Be fair.
He's fine on Breaking Bad, it turns out. Now I've been paying attention to that, for he's writing for Breaking Bad.
He is, yeah.
Yeah. First broadcast on the 17th of January 1999. Guest stars Kenneth Tiger as Dr. Plant, who sounds like he should have been a villain, but no, he was fine. He was in Phantasm 2. He is in Lethal Weapons 2 and 3, Conspiracy Theory, The Avengers. And he's actually weirdly the guy who stood up to Loki in Germany.
Oh, right, yeah.
Cheers, Star Trek Next Generation and Voyager, and Elementary.
Okay.
We also have Jenny Gago as Dr. Katrina Cabrera, who was in The Man with Two Brains, Inner Space, and Max Headroom.
Okay.
Got quite a varied one. I mean, The Man with Two Brains is not something I expect to hearing on anyone's IMDb list, but there we are.
I wasn't expecting Max Headroom, to be honest.
No, and that's a TV series as well, as far as I can tell, rather than the Channel 4 pilot.
Max Headroom as we know him.
Yes. And John Towie as Dr. Kenneth Orgel, who, also in the weird ones, was in Star Trek Deep Space Nine and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Okay. Fair enough.
I don't think we've ever had that crossover before.
So, do you have a synopsis for this one?
I do, from Wikipedia. The episode opens with Skinner, unwell and horribly discoloured in hospital. His veins are a sickly purple hue and are pulsating ominously. Suddenly he goes into cardiac arrest and dies.
Short episode.
Short episode. Skinner's out. Not really. 24 hours earlier, Skinner loses a boxing match after experiencing a dizzy spell. While at hospital, he receives a call on his cell phone from a computerized voice telling him he only has 24 hours to live. Turns out he's actually looked at the videotape from Ring. That was 7 days. Never mind.
That was 7 days. Nice try, though.
Damn. He is discharged from hospital, but Mulder notices when he returns to the FBI and calls Scully. Between them, they witness a bruise on Skinner's ribs. After trawling through nearby security footage from the entrance to the J. Edgar Hoover building, Scully recognizes a physicist named Dr. Kenneth Orgel, who advises a Senate subcommittee on ethics and new technology. He stopped Skinner previously in the day. Mulder and Scully travel to Orgel's house, but find he is being held hostage. Mulder apprehends one of the kidnappers who does not speak English. Skinner forces him to be released when they discover he has a diplomatic immunity. Mulder does a background check on the kidnapper, which leads him to Senator Richard Matheson. This results in a dead end. Scully discovers Skinner's blood sample. After checking, she finds that Skinner's blood contains some sort of multiplying carbon nanotechnology. Meanwhile, Skinner winds up in hospital following a gunfight in the FBI parking garage. Mulder and Scully reunite at the hospital, where Mulder tells Scully that Skinner was investigating a health funding bill called SR-819. Mulder then chases a suspicious bearded man who sent a threatening message to Skinner's phone, but escapes. Talking to Scully, Skinner remembers seeing the bearded man at the hot boxing club, the FBI, and the hospital. Senator Matheson arrives at an old power plant where Orgel is kept and suffers from the same condition afflicting Skinner. Before Matheson can free him, Orgel dies as the bearded man maximizes the nanotechnological effects via some remote control. Mulder arrives later in the power plant and confronts Matheson. At the hospital, Skinner goes into cardiac arrest as per the sting, but suddenly revives when the bearded man deactivates his remote control. Later, Mulder and Scully report to Skinner, who is back in good health and claims to not recognise the bearded man. Skinner closes the case, ordering the agents to report back to Agent Kersh as they should be. In the final scene, the bearded man appears in Skinner's car and is revealed to have been a disguised Alex Krycek. He has not removed the nanotechnology from Skinner's body and can potentially use it in the future.
Da-da-da-da.
Kyrian. Bonus points if you get what that's a reference to. Not just the Kyrian bit, but in fact the tone of voice. Anyway, this episode is, it's a John Shaban episode, isn't it?
It very much is a John Shaban episode.
What in the hell is going on?
I rather love this episode. It's just so ridiculous.
It's not boring or slow, but at the same time, you just end up asking, there's a lot of whys and there's no explanation for basically any of it.
But in essence, that kind of makes it a more old school X-Files episode, to be honest. We've had a slew of kind of comedic and slightly disappointing ones, and this feels like a season 1 episode.
It does, but with all the limitations that come with season 1 of the X-Files, they don't quite know how to write them yet.
Yeah, I saw a really fair criticism of this one, and largely it should be noted that this did get kind of mixed positive reviews, I'd say. But one of them commented on the fact that, yeah, it very much is like what we would expect if you were trying to describe an X-Files episode to someone. But at the same time, you're going on the whole, it's the kind of, it feels like it's giving you a lot but really isn't giving you anything at all, which is very much a summary of the original conspiracy.
Yeah, and I'll also say, I think we're left with evidence of something that we just discard and never comes up again. Or we're unclear on this, because memory is a bit faulty on how, if this ever comes up again. I think there's a nod in one of the summaries of it will come up one more time, and that's it.
You mean Skinner's nanomachines?
Yeah. I mean, it just feel remarkable that Scully is so blasé about what she's seen, because this is, for 1999, this was impossible tech. For these days, it's impossible tech. But you've seen in a microscope literal nanomachines. And she's just, that doesn't faze her.
And really, there's nothing else that you can describe these things as, because they do look like little sea mines floating in his blood that, if you blink, they multiply.
Exactly. It's there's nothing else for it. This is not like Lost, where, they're not nanomachines. It's I have never quite understood what the thing was in Lost and quite why they did what they did, but these are definitely nanomachines.
Oh, yeah.
And Skinner definitely has them in his blood. We can take a blood sample right now and find them.
I quite like for the mystery when Scully goes to look at his blood sample and it's got the kind of layer of silt in it.
Yeah.
That's a really intriguing shot where she pulls it out and says, "Have you already processed these?" And the doctor's utterly baffled.
Yeah. I thought he was definitely on the take, but no. It was actually level.
He did look shady, Dr. Plant. And calling him Dr. Plant as well.
It might be a double bluff, but it's like when he's the doctor who's advising Skinner and says, go home, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It goes, he's part of the cover-up, and no, he's not.
For the record, the inspiration of this episode was an older movie which was remade in the 80s called DOA, or Dead on Arrival.
Okay.
And the plot of that movie essentially is a character who in the remake is Dennis Quaid. I can't remember who he was in the original. But he's been poisoned and he's got 24 hours to find out who's poisoned him before he's going to succumb to it. And so we have that exact same idea, only replace the poison with nanomachines. And a bit more of a positive outcome because Dennis Quaid evidently didn't have X-Files plot armour.
No. There's a lot to follow the episode on. One of them is, the episode looks like it's going to be Skinner-centric, and then it turns out it's not Skinner-centric at all.
Yeah, he didn't really feature as much in the episode as you'd think, given the plots about him.
Yeah, not unlike the sting. It's a really good sting. I like the sting. I think we're even pretty sure on the first broadcast that Skinner is not going to die like this, even though that's one of the intents of the episode.
Originally, apparently, Mulder was going to be the one to get infected with the nanomachines, but they picked Skinner just on the basis of you could plausibly believe they'd kill Skinner off in the opening. They're not going to kill Mulder.
No, well, they've actually pulled that trick before, though, because that's like the start of Colony, was Mulder goes into cardiac arrest in an operating theatre while Scully's saying the cold's the only thing keeping him alive.
Yeah, true.
So we have actually pulled that stunt before, and yeah, you didn't believe it back then, you're really not going to believe it now. let's talk about Krychek in this episode. So, on the one hand, it's good that they keep his name off the opening credits, so don't know he's in the episode, and the disguise on him is actually pretty good, because like you described him when we were talking about the episode before we watched it, he looks like the Unabomber.
He does look like the Unabomber.
I'm not going to dispute this, and that's quite effective, and he's a kind of a good lurking figure, though he looks suspicious, I think is the only problem, when he's lurking on a hospital, typing things on a, whatever that is.
A kind of palm pal, but something you can't really judge now because I know it is Krychek, but I'm pretty sure the first time I watched it, I didn't realise until very close to the end.
No, I don't think I did either.
I think at the very least it's when Skinner's on his deathbed and you see him watching him, it's quite obvious it's Krychek, but I'm not sure you can really tell before then.
No, I think that's definitely good. The deathbed scene will sort of go two bits. One is the fake out with Skinner dying is terribly resolved.
Yeah.
Because it's Skinner's flatlined, and then Krychek twiddles the little dial and Skinner's fine.
I'm not sure medicine works this way unless these nanomachines are actively defibrillating him. How you bring him back from the flatline. If you suddenly unblock an artery, it's not going to start his heart beating again.
No, so, we give them a lot of credit and say maybe this is what the nanomachines are actually for, is that they're not meant to kill someone, they're actually meant to sort of mediate heart conditions or try and revive people. Krychek's just not using it for the right purposes.
It is unclear what they are for because we don't really get to hear what SR-819 actually is. We know it's some kind of state-of-the-art medical technology.
Yeah.
But we never find out what it's actively supposed to be for.
No, they're very vague on that. Get back to Krychek, though, is he saves Skinner at the end. And someone, somewhere, looks like they forgot that Krychek's missing an arm.
Oh, he uses the wrong hand.
Yeah, because I was sure that there was a point in the X-Files where I thought he got his arm back, because there's definitely a point where it doesn't look like he's missing an arm, and we seem to have hit it.
I think it's a goof. You don't specifically see that he's got his arms in this, but there's just one scene where he activates his little device with the left hand.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he lost his left hand.
Whichever arm it is, he doesn't seem to have lost the use of an arm again.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, they couldn't have gone parachuting for one thing.
Oh, apparently that's physically impossible if you've got one arm. But yeah.
So we were a bit willing that. But that's the last time we saw Krychek, wasn't it? Parachuting.
Yeah, I think so.
So what is Krychek doing? Because he parachuted down to bring Cancer Man back into the fold. He then drove Well Manicured Man around. Well Manicured Man then apparently fired Krychek and hired a different driver.
Yep.
They then exploded, and no one cares about either of them anymore.
And we haven't seen Krychek since up until this point.
And now he's hanging over Tunisian nationals.
Who, I'm not sure what his relationship with these nationals are either. Because it's, one of the many scenes in a parking lot. But there's one where the Tunisian nationals are shooting for Skinner and Krychek mows one of them down in a car.
Yeah, whose side is Krychek on? Because this is one of the weird episodes where he's the cause of all the problems and then the solution to all the problems.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting he's got Skinner back in his control now, though, because I guess Skinner's not been left with a lot to do lately. We haven't seen him much this season because Mulder and Scully aren't on the X-Files at the moment. But now we've got him back in the level where he's kind of morally ambiguous, because I guess his life is in Krychek's hands, so he's got to do what Krychek tells him. Whatever that is.
Which is, nothing so far.
Depends who's kind of pulling Krychek's chain at the moment.
Well, you'd assume it's Cancer Man again, but we don't know, because they've not interacted since
You'd
then.
assume that Krychek would be reticent to trust the Cancer Man as well, given that the Cancer Man's already tried to have him assassinated once.
Very true. At the same time, we come back to Krychek did this to Skinner, which kicked off the whole plot, and Krychek saved Skinner at the end. And Skinner, purports to not recognise Krychek, but clearly does. How Mulder doesn't see the disguise, I don't understand. That's weird.
You mean when they're reviewing the tapes?
Well, we're reviewing tapes, and when he's got the surveillance footage of this is the man. It's like, Mulder, a clear shot of Krychek, it's Krychek. And he even takes the wig off at the end. I think that's one of the weirder points, is when they get the car that Krychek tried to escape in, they find wig fibres. So it's not like, I thought ages ago that he'd just grown his hair out and got shaggy, but no, he's wearing a wig. Krychek, what are you doing? I've lost all understanding.
It's kind of neat how often the Unabomber Krychek is in the background because you don't really pay attention to him at all. Like at the boxing match at the start.
Yeah, I think that's done really well. If you know to look at him, it's very clearly Nicholas Lee. But your focus isn't going to be on him because he's just someone walking past the ring.
It's kind of the Tyler Durden effect. He's often in the background, but you don't really notice.
Yeah. Unless you're like us and have seen this before and we know, oh yeah, that's Krychek, we're going to pay attention to him. I think the other one to get to is Senator Matheson.
Mm.
And I think this episode underscores that Senator Matheson has technically been in the mix since the pilot. Since Mulder references friends in the Senate or friends on Capitol Hill, he references a friend in a high place.
Yeah.
And it's not until Little Green Men that we actually saw Senator Matheson tall. And in this case, okay, that fits together well enough. And the senator was absent in the One Breath when Mulder tried to go to them for help.
Yeah.
And he was only inferred in there. And now we're in season 6, possibly his second ever appearance. And he's basically a villain. Sort of. It's a very weird state for him to be in.
Again, it's unclear how villainous he is because we still don't know what the actual application of the nanomachine should be.
No.
But we know he's involved with the passing of this SR 819 bill.
Which Skinner was also involved in. But ultimately, we don't know if... Because it doesn't go through, does it, ultimately?
No, it doesn't.
And it's really unclear how much of what Krychek does affects that.
It's also unclear, I think, if it doesn't go through on the basis of it's something inherently shady, or if Krychek has found a more sinister application for this thing that's relatively benign.
Yes, I mean, it makes sense for that. It's possibly how Skinner comes back to life at the end after, flatlining.
Mm.
Is maybe this was actually designed for treating people, and like a lot of medical technology, if you push it to the limits, it can kill someone. But it's meant to do something else in the interim.
Well, think on the basis of treatments like radiotherapy.
Yeah, and chemotherapy, which you are poisoning someone with.
Yeah, but radiotherapy too, you're bombarding someone with radiation, which is usually a bad thing.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing it in a controlled measure, which is life-saving.
True. I mean, you can even go to X-rays.
Mm.
These X-rays are absolutely harmful. That's why people run out of the room whenever they give you an X-ray.
And wear lead vests.
Yeah, because they're exposed to too much of it. They cannot be anywhere near it when it goes off.
Mm.
You are supposed to not actually be as badly irradiated. But it feels like Senator Matheson is a guest star or a secondary, tertiary character they never found a use for, and his appearances get increasingly weird. I mean, it's only been 2 appearances now, but this one is so odd, because I think it's when Mulder goes to the power plant and finds him there. The fact that he's just been, sulking by the bed for 2 hours?
Even though somebody has apparently in this time removed Dr. Ogel's body.
Yeah, and I do wonder how much of that is someone said, we want to have the confrontation here, but we can't let Mulder have a body that could be then investigated and nanomachines extracted from, even though we can extract them from Skinner's blood because they're still in there, as far as we understand. So, someone's going to take the body away. Krychek is going to come down, take the body away. Matherson's just going to stand there until Mulder shows up.
Mm.
This is what we're suggesting.
Apparently so.
But I do think as well that you're meant to get a sense of betrayal from the senator, but you can't because he's had so little bearing on the series. This feels like it should be a betrayal.
Yeah.
It isn't. Because we don't have a relationship with Matheson. Mulder does, but we don't understand how that one works either.
No. Do we know if Masterson appears again after this point?
I'm pretty sure this is it. This is his last
really?
appearance.
That's kind of disappointing in that case.
It is. He's gone out on a real low there. I don't think he even dies. I think he just will never be mentioned again.
Well, I guess after this point, Mulder wouldn't trust him anymore.
Well, I actually want to say for the first time, this is a Monster of the Week episode, though it's kind of tangentially conspiracy, where we kind of needed that second episode. Because we need to actually get into how this is all working and what's going on behind the scenes.
What Krychek's actually up to.
Yeah, how Krychek's been involved in this, what the pressures on Matheson are, because Skinner seems to be blithely ignorant of the implications of what he's looking at.
It sounds like this is the kind of thing Skinner does a lot because, what is it? They call it something like a trade bill and it's part of his job is to review them.
Yeah.
So this is not a weird and isolated thing. This is something Skinner does as part of his job.
Yeah. And so this is why he doesn't bother bringing it up to Mulder when he's asking him about what he's done recently or what his days are like.
You know, interestingly, there was a SR-819 in real life.
And how many FBI directors died from nanobot infection?
Absolutely none. It was not. It's vaguely related, but it's not nanobot related.
I'm very disappointed.
They're not actually called SR bills in the United States. They're just S. But SR, as far as I can tell, stands for Senate Resolution.
Okay.
So it's Senate Resolution 819. There was an S-819 in 1993, which referred to the regulation of a toxic and potentially deadly chemical, which I am probably going to mangle the pronunciation of this now, is trifluoromethylenolene.
Okay.
Is the name of the chemical. And so the real SR-819 or S-819 bill was to extend the temporary suspension of duty on that chemical. So you do have this kind of biochemical sort of feel to it, which is, I guess, not a stretch to turn that into a nanomachine as your deadly kind of toxin.
Yeah, I can see the argument.
Yeah. I don't know if it's intentional, but it feels close enough that this would be a nod, especially as it was in 93.
Yeah. Again, the year the X-Files started.
Mm.
One thing I'm still very unclear on is, when was Skinner infected with nanomachines?
It's unclear in the episode, but I took it to be in the boxing match.
Yeah, though it's not clear how they did that, and the implication for how the episode is shot is Orgel does it when he grabs his wrist, because he's wearing gloves.
But it wasn't Orgel, that was a red herring.
And yeah, and later on it's a case of why would it be Orgel, but then we don't actually get a decent explanation of when it happens.
I still feel it's got to be in the boxing match, because you saw Krycek lurking around in the background there.
True, but that's
why else would he be there?
But that's the first time Skinner has a dizzy spell.
But it could be because he's just been infected.
It could be. I mean...
And he's only got the smallest of little bruises then.
That's true. I mean, to be fair, a lot of it is... Krycek, why did you start so slow? Why did you... And not tell Skinner that's what you're doing. I mean, it's not a great threat to just try and slowly give someone a heart attack.
He kind of did tell him, you have been poisoned sort of automated message.
But he didn't say, you must pass SR-819, or say it has to go to committee, or block SR-819. There's no threat.
See, I'm still not entirely sure it's actually connected to SR-819 in any way.
I know.
There's no direct cause other than the fact that Orgel was trying to warn Skinner about something innocuous about this bill.
And he saw Krycek and then panicked.
Yeah.
What happens in this episode? I'm so confused.
Yeah, it's baffling. It's like we kind of forgot halfway through that our focus was this bill and not just Mulder chasing around Senator Matheson.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen DOA, but I imagine if I went and saw DOA, I'd get a much more focused plot line on curing a poison.
All I know about it is that Shiban considered DOA to be a bad film, and he was trying to do his X-Files spin on it. So I guess if this is what we got off the back of it and we're considering DOA to be a bad film, I dread to think.
True, but I'm curious. I do like we're continuing Scully's less than great medical practices. Because this is, we're about to operate on Skinner, and we're going to cut off his arm, because otherwise Skinner's going to lose an arm. Arms, yeah. We're going to start with one and then the other. And Scully just bursts in and they tell her to get out, and all she says, I'm a doctor, you must listen to what I say. And the other people don't say, we are also doctors, get out.
You know, if you've got plot armour, you don't need to worry about sterile environments.
I mean, they hadn't started operating at least, so there's that, but you'd think
they would have still been sterilised if they'd gone into the room.
So it's the whole ordering them out. You think they say, great, now we have to re-sterilise everything and re-prep. But it's still the fact that Scully just keeps shouting at them that she knows what to do.
She's done this several times. I mean, we saw it in Colony and Endgame.
Yep.
And we saw it in the one with the time travel synchrony.
Yeah.
Of Scully blundering in places because she's a doctor and knows best.
Yeah. And you've got to have some kind of ego to do that. To shout at the doctor, I'm a doctor, I know what's going on. I'm also a doctor.
That's great, I'm the surgeon.
Yeah, I've also been to medical school. I'm a practicing doctor. You're an FBI agent. I outrank you.
I'm not sure about the science of this as well, because they talk about how they're keeping Skinner alive in the short term by lasering his arteries open.
Yeah, I'm not sure now.
I'm not sure exactly how this works, but it sounds dramatic.
It does, and also cleaning his plasma, and presumably you could filter the nanomachines, maybe? I don't know.
They're supposed to be microscopically small, so I imagine you probably couldn't filter them out of the blood.
Yeah, you can filter on a molecular level. It's not easy.
Yeah, but if you're looking at his blood, those nanomachines are a lot smaller than his blood cells.
It's true.
If they were larger than the blood cells, I think you'd have a good chance of filtering them out.
True, but it's just the plasma they're doing, not the blood cells themselves. So if you can get the... I don't know. I don't think any of this episode makes much sense, ultimately. I think one of the other problems with the episode, and I think it's kind of applied to ranking as well, is they do correct for it at the end, but it's almost written like it's a non-season 6 episode of The X-Files. Like Mulder and Scully actually work for Skinner.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of it, because like Mulder notices Skinner come in and talks to him, and at the end they say, oh, we can go and investigate, and he says, no, you work for Kersh.
Yeah.
Get away from me. So it's, aside from that though, it's like this would be any other season of The X-Files. This would just slot in and you wouldn't actually have a problem.
I think the ending would have given me more pause, particularly as Scully as well, because there's a rather lovely scene when Skinner's in hospital where he apologises to Scully and says something like, your fight should have been my fight.
Yeah.
And, he talks about how he admires them. But then in that final scene, his attitude has changed, kind of complete 180. And I think in particular for Scully, that would have given me some concern.
Yeah, I feel she should have reacted to that. There should be some follow-up to that, and we don't get one. My memory of the series was Mulder constantly chafing against Kersh, which is basically not happening. But how are Mulder and Scully able to run around and do this thing for Skinner all day when they're meant to be doing background checks, and presumably someone is saying they're not at their desks? Where are they? Why are they talking to Skinner all day? This has nothing to do with them. Get back. And I feel there's also a missed opportunity, because Mulder kind of asks Skinner what it's like having Spender running the X-Files, and we don't get any answers from that. There's no follow-up to that question.
I think it would have been slightly sus that Spender's never solved a case in all the time he's been on the X-Files, but there's been a lot of shredding in that office lately.
True. Well, I mean, in a completely mundane, real-world thing, you could actually see it as Spender on the X-Files is taking the ones that have a rational explanation, like people are seeing lights over a military base. Those are planes. People reporting a weird glowing thing in the air through some hazy rippling. It is Venus through swamp gas.
And you're ignoring ones like The Host, which has no rational explanation to it.
Exactly. Even the ones that are scientifically plausible we have evidence for, they're just not doing them. I mean, I did touch on it a while back. I think it was off the back of Travellers. The X-Files investigations don't make sense on themselves, because the X-Files is where the reports that are unclassified go.
Yeah.
Not active investigations. So quite what Mulder is doing, I don't understand. But anyway, that's the whole basis of our series, and if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have anything to talk about.
True.
Do we have anything else for this episode?
Well, for some reason I've written ABH in my margin. Do you know what I was making notes on?
I do. Because when they go to Orgel's house, he answers the door and says, I've no idea what you're talking about, when they sort of say, you approached Skinner this morning.
Yeah.
From all your experiences, Mulder, from everything you've seen, Skinner not so much, but Mulder, you should know this, that could be the shapeshifters. That might not be
Alien
Orgel.
Bounty Hunter, that's why I wrote it.
That's why you wrote it. And again, we've been pointing this out for a load of episodes, that no one stops and says, I think outside of Small Potatoes, neither of them have stopped and said, we've seen literal shapeshifters. We need to take this into account literally every time.
Yes, you're right. That's exactly what I was thinking, is any time where somebody claims they've never seen you and don't know what's going on, it could be because you saw an alien bounty hunter.
Yeah, or vice versa. Oh, this is the alien bounty hunter.
Yeah, and he's already done away with
Orgel. Yeah. And especially if you're touching on conspiracy stuff, and this one is kind of tangential, but it is kind of connected back to the conspiracy, so there was an actual excellent chance this was an alien bounty hunter.
Yeah.
But we're just going to ignore that.
It's unfortunate logic now everybody knows that the alien bounty hunter can shapeshift.
Yeah. It's a level of paranoia Mulder could assume in his investigations that, I think we pointed this out before, that how can you trust anyone after you've experienced the bounty hunter? You know, Scully looks a bit off one day. Like, never again. When Scully is being kind of out of character and kind of weird.
Or Dreamland with Fletcher.
Yeah. Both instances, they should be really, really suspicious of this person who's suddenly deviated out of character, because they might be an alien plant. And no, we just don't. We just ignore that possibility every time. I understand the complexity and complications that then involves in a TV series like this. However, if you've got an ongoing plot and you've got plot arcs like you do need to deal with it.
There are a couple of points I'd like to make of things I actually liked about the episode.
Okay.
One is that it's following the procedural format, which I think X-Files, the best X-Files episodes are the ones that kind of behave like police procedures.
That's true. We do generally give kudos to the ones that do procedural stuff. It's just that some of those procedural episodes are nightmares.
This one kind of disintegrates halfway through, but I do like the fact they're following this as a proper investigation, even down to analysing mud in the car treads and things like that to figure out where the Tunisians have come from.
Yeah, that's a good one, because that's something we don't normally get very often.
And the other thing I liked, again, as I've said, a lot of the practical effects of how flipping good does Skinner look with the progression of the illness, with the kind of pulsating black veins and things like that.
Oh yeah, it looks horrible, and that's unpleasant.
Again, there is some CGI touch-up here, but a lot of that is just makeup effects. Even Mitch Pileggi kind of mentioned the fact that he found it absolutely arduous and hated sitting in the chair. I think his wording was something about he doesn't know how, like, Star Trek actors do it and things like that. But he was really impressed by the finished product and how just creepy and effective that black vein effect looks.
It does look good. I'd say the contrary to that, though, is when Cratchit kills Orgel, it looks really kind of rubbish, and also, that's not how your veins clogging up would look. What's going on?
It might be how your veins look when they're filling it with carbon.
It might be, I suppose, but yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. But do we have anything else, or shall we take a trip to New York? We can go to Broadway.
We're not going to Broadway.
No, we're not. But we're going to.
We're going to the set of NYPD Blue, I believe. But
oh, and I think we go to the Bronx at one point.
No, seriously, it was largely shot on NYPD Blue sound stages.
I'll believe you. I mean, presumably gives the authentic New York look while you're filming in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So obviously we're talking about Tithonus, directed by Michael W. Watkins, written by Vince Gilligan. That explains quite a bit. First broadcast on the 24th of January 1999. Guest stars Jeffrey Lewis as Alfred Fellig, was in The Lawnmower Man.
Oh gosh, no.
And House MD.
Oh, that's better.
That's better. And Matt Galini, who is credited as Hood, who I'm guessing is the guy who stabbed the guy in the alley with his shoes, was in Seinfeld. And Get Smart.
Okay.
The film version. The film. The one we actually watched.
I believe as well that the detective in this one had quite a career.
He did, but not stuff we've actually seen him in.
He was in Joey.
Was he in Joey?
Yeah, he's a fairly major character in Joey.
See, I've never watched Joey properly.
And Two Guys, a Girl in a Pizza Place was his big one.
Ah, you see, I've never seen that one either.
So you just discount it. They're fairly big things.
I've said in the past, these people do lots of... Some of these people have really great varied careers. I've never seen anything they've been in except The X-Files.
Well, there you go.
No, that's me told. Would you like to give us a summary of Tithonus?
Sure. And as always, mostly cribbed from Wikipedia, with embellishments. Our episode this time opens in New York City, where we see a creepy elderly man with a camera following a woman from an elevator and into the corridor and another elevator beyond. As he reaches the second elevator, the woman he's following, obviously quite freaked out by this stage, he notices that all the people standing inside it appear to be grayscaled. He gets off a floor before the woman and races down the stairs. Meanwhile, in the elevator, we see the lights go funny and the cable snaps, plummeting it to the ground. As the man reaches the basement, the elevator cab crashes to the ground, and its door kind of falls open, revealing a woman's arm and a lot of blood. The man does not do anything to assist and instead stops to take photographs. Meanwhile, back in DC, Kersh approaches Scully to assign her a new case, working alongside a person from the New York office called Agent Peyton Ritter. This case is looking into a photographer who always seems to be suspiciously the first on many different death scenes, with a whole variety ranging from murders to natural causes, the only commonality being he gets there before the cases are reported to the police. Scully alone is assigned to this case and is told to leave Mulder behind, basically because Kersh sees that she might have a future and Mulder is a lost cause. However, when Mulder flips through the evidence, he points out to Scully that it looks an awful lot like an X-File. It's not long before Scully and Ritter discover that their prime suspect, the elderly man we saw at the start, whose name is Alfred Fellig, has worked as a police photographer since 1964, yet in all of his official photos, he doesn't seem to have aged at all in this time. Meanwhile, we see a couple of times in the city of Fellig stalking people who die within his witness. The first one being a man who has a heart attack. The second is a youth who is brutally murdered by a criminal who is trying to steal his trainers. As Fellig approaches the young man to take photos of his dying body, the murderer returns and repeatedly stabs Fellig in the back. However, we see that Fellig rises seemingly unharmed and pulls the knife out of his back as he leaves. The knife that he pulled from his back is later found by Scully and Ritter, and by finding that Fellig's prints are all over it, it gives them due cause to bring him in for questioning. Ritter demands to know how Fellig always seems to be around when people die, but Scully notices Fellig's pain and asks if he was wounded in the attack. Fellig allows him to see the wounds on his back and she immediately sends him to a hospital. Much to Ritter's disgust, Ritter reminds Scully that this is a murder investigation and they are trying to charge Fellig, not release him. That night, Scully is left to stake out Fellig's apartment, and she notices that Fellig is taking photos of her out the window. She bangs on the door and demands to know the truth of what's been happening. Fellig invites her to take a ride with him so he can show her how he does know when people are going to die. During this drive, he sees a prostitute who appears to him to be entirely in grey. He tells Scully that he knows that the woman will be dead very soon, the only thing he doesn't know is how. As a pimp begins to harass the prostitute, Scully leaps out the car with a gun and handcuffs the pimp. The prostitute tries to flee the scene and is hit by a truck and killed. The following day, Scully goes back to Fellig once more to point out to him that he is about to be charged for murder. She accuses him of profiting off people's death, something that Fellig seems incredibly apathetic towards. In his dark room, he shows Scully some of his photos. One in particular is a picture of a dead woman who has this strange kind of blur near her head. He claims that this is a photograph of death. When asked why he is trying to photograph death, Fellig tells him that his motivation is he needs to look death in the face so he can finally die. He explains to her that he's actually 149 years old and has tried many times to kill himself and failed every time. Although Scully points out that most people would like to be immortal, Felix says that he's experienced everything there is from life, and not even love lasts forever. It's revealed that he can't even remember his wife's name, and the fact that he feels that death now is the one thing that is a certainty for everyone except him, so he's missing out on the final event of what would be his life. In his backstory, Fellig reveals that he was once meant to die of yellow fever, but he refused to look death in his face when he came from him, so death instead took the life of the kindly nurse who was taking care of him. This is how Fellig missed his chance and has become functionally immortal. Fellig notices that Scully has turned grey and tries to photograph her. Scully begins to quite rightfully freak out about this. Just at that moment, Ritter enters the dark room and shoots Fellig. The bullet passes right through his camera and Fellig, and into Scully, who collapses. As Ritter in a panic rushes to call an ambulance, Fellig asks Scully whether she sees death, the implication being that she can, and begs her to close her eyes. As he holds her hand, the colour begins to return to Scully, but is leached out of Fellig's body. He looks up and smiles as he dies, presumably finally seeing death. At the hospital, Mulder watches through a window as Ritter apologises to Scully. He then tells Ritter that he's a very lucky man because Scully survived. Mulder goes into the room and reports to Scully that Fellig died of a single gunshot wound, while the doctors are amazed at how quickly Scully is recovering.
Thank you. Let's talk about Clyde Bruckman's final repose.
You've been waiting so long for this.
I have. Well, I remember when we first watched this episode, and like my memories of previous episode, I'm convinced I had this discussion in high school, which is actively impossible because I was well away from high school by the time of this broadcast. But as soon as this episode went out, and I'm pretty sure there was some buzz about it even before it got to the UK, everyone basically connected this right back to Clyde Bruckman.
Yeah.
Because this is the sort of confirmation of what Clyde Bruckman told Scully in season 3.
The fact that Scully will not die.
Yeah. And it's interesting that I think, according to the behind the scenes stuff, that there's a whole load of misunderstandings, but they've nevertheless gone with the fan version of it. Like, I'm pretty sure Darren Morgan said that Clyde Bruckman was just being nice to her because he didn't want to give her the grisly details. And I think either Vince Gilligan or Franz Botnitz said the point of this episode is that Felig has saved her for this time, but next time she won't be so lucky.
Yeah.
But fandom absolutely ran with, this is now actually giving her what Clyde Bruckman said she was going to get.
I think you've got the feeling that she might be immortal from the ending.
Yes.
In the fact that she's recovering miraculously faster than any doctor has ever seen. Much like Felig gets stabbed several times in the back and he's up and walking very quickly.
Yeah, so I think there's enough in the episode to really lean into that. I think it's been left deliberately ambiguous enough that you can read either way into it. I certainly always took it as, yeah, we've actually given Scully the immortality that Clyde Bruckman said she was going to get. We had no idea this was the mechanism to do it, but it's kind of nice to sort of see this sort of payoff. However inadvertently it was, given from all the stuff I've read around this, no one was actively thinking of Clyde Bruckman when they did this. It just everyone sort of said, wait a minute. But that's great, and I do like just the setup of it. This whole idea you have to look death in the face when he comes for you, otherwise it won't work.
I do feel that's my one weakness of the episode is you'd think immortality would be a lot more common.
Yes.
When you see the terrifying hooded, well, you don't know what he looks like, but the terrifying figure coming towards you and you close your eyes and that's all it takes to survive.
Yeah, I think you've got to take it as a story, and you just have to let go of, there are so many cases where this can't possibly work.
Yeah.
Like, the sex worker who got run over by a truck, she was not staring into death's face when that happened.
Or what if you're blind and you physically can't look at death?
Exactly. You have to take it as this is a gothic short story.
And they do the smart thing of we never see death. The closest you get is that one like lens flare in a picture.
Yeah, I thought that was a great idea. Also, the whole, he's here, and you see the glow outside the curtains, and for a minute you're thinking, what on earth is going on? And it's Peyton.
Yeah.
But then also the fact that it's all shot from the wrong angle for whatever Scully is seeing and whatever Felig is seeing in those last moments. That's great. Exactly. Do this kind of thing more often. Absolutely perfect. Because whatever you did for death at this point, even if you did something like how the Discworld things did it, which is a pretty good death, people are going to start laughing.
A skeleton in a cloak. The kind
With
of...
the scythe.
Yeah.
The actual Grim Reaper showing up. You're going to laugh. If you did it like Sandman, it's going to come out of nowhere. You're going to say, what on earth is happening?
Yeah.
And, a cloud, or like, let's bring back Lost again, go smoke monster. You're going to go, what? Really? So yeah, I like how they did death. That's good. And the lens flary thing is great ambiguity point. He's caught something, it's not clear what it is.
There's also the implication that there is something frightening about it, because that's why Felig wouldn't look at death the first time. But he looks so happy to see the death when death finally does come for him at the end.
Well, that's the fulfillment. This is what he's wanted for so long.
I think it's the only time in the episode you see him smile.
Yeah. And we would say that he's a perfect casting choice for this. He actually gives a sense of someone who has just endured too long.
Well, the legend this is based on, of course, is the story of Tithonus, which in Greek mythology, Tithonus was loved by Eos, who's the goddess of dawn. So she went before Zeus and said, there's this human, I love him, I can't stand to think of him die, please make him immortal. And so Zeus did exactly what was said on the tin, but making him immortal means he lives forever. Eos didn't ask for him to be eternally young. So he essentially became withered, elderly, found himself decrepit, couldn't do anything, and just cursed this endless existence. And in some versions, eventually withered away so far that he became an insect, a cicada. Because in Greek mythology you had this idea of a creature that sheds its skin is constantly renewing itself, therefore it's immortal, so ceased to be something human in the end.
Okay, like I said, logic. That's a very different way this could have gone, I suppose.
But you've still got that idea here is he's trapped at the point he was when he died, which is a man in his mid-60s.
Yeah.
And he's lost everything. He started to forget the things he did like what his wife was like. in life because it's just been too long.
Or even her name.
And anything he does to try and alleviate his suffering, because he mentions multiple suicide attempts and shows the scars on his wrists and things, but nothing works. He's just trapped like this.
I do like the comment about the throwing himself off multiple bridges. Do you know how many bridges I've thrown myself off? All I get is wet.
Yeah.
I like that. It's a darkly comedic.
Yeah,
tone.
apparently the actor is best known for playing these kind of dour, sour-faced characters, and he does so tremendously. It's the perfect casting, like you said.
He is. We should have a word with Scully, though, in this episode, because she is... I don't want to... It's not quite as far out as Never Again was, but she's still putting herself into situations she probably shouldn't, like going up to the suspect's door in the middle of the night after he's been spying on her, and then saying, "Do you want to take a ride with me? You think this guy kills people? What are you doing?" And yeah, she's ultimately fine, but then he steals her phone so that she can't learn that he actually did actively kill someone. Or two
Oh yes,
people,
I missed that in my thing. He did kill 2 people, yeah.
I'm kind of in two minds about that. I don't know if I can see the desperation, him getting to that point to try and lure death to him. At the same time, I feel it undercuts the tragedy of it a little bit. And also why he hasn't tried to kill more people.
Interestingly, on this aside, all his different aliases throughout time are all named after famous photographers.
Oh, that's cool.
I thought that was a neat little detail.
But I do like they sort of, using his crime scene photography thing as an excuse to be close to these things, even though he's getting there ahead of time.
Mm.
And presumably, photographing a scene, trying to photograph death, then being brought back in to photograph the scene anyway, and presumably just mixing up the negatives at some point when he hasn't been quite paying attention to which photo is which.
Yeah. The whole episode just has this wonderful tone to it, and it's hard to get across what it feels like watching it, because it's a slow burn episode. Not a lot of excitement actually happens in this one, to be fair. But it's just, you said gothic before, and that's the feel. It's this just kind of sense of dread throughout it.
Yeah. I think it's almost theatrical. You could do this on stage with very little changes.
Yeah.
Because it's mostly monologues from him and dialogues between him and Scully is what most of it actually comprises ultimately.
And it's all carried entirely because he's such a compelling character.
Yes. And also the actor as well. I mean, if you miscast him, this is not going to work.
Mm.
So he's kind of very intrinsic to it.
It's following the vein of villains we've seen in this series as well, as we mentioned with Wayne in terms of endearment, and his name's gone, but Bryan Cranston's character in Drive. Of these characters that are very clearly villains, they're not nice people, but you empathise with them.
Yes. Because they're basically stuck in positions they can't get out of.
Mm.
They possibly wouldn't be quite as bad as they are if they were not stuck.
Mm. And driven to do things that they might not otherwise have done were it not for these circumstances they can't escape.
Yeah, and it's aside from those 2 murders that he absolutely did do, most of Felix's issues are just the sheer callousness of it.
It's his apathy, which you see personified in the rather grisly, actually, elevator accident at the start.
Yeah.
Where there's no compassion, no sadness in his face, no attempt to help these people at all. He just waits so he can take the picture of the corpses.
And I do like things like him hurrying down the stairs and then the blast of wind as the elevator is coming down. He's just sort of weathering everything to wait for the doors to open.
You've also got his lack of reaction as well, because we see the creeping pool of blood in his just through the lens of his camera as well. Yeah. So you've got that level of detachment he has too. We're seeing this just kind of cold, photographing it like you would a flower.
So one interesting thing, and this is the thing we brought up for SI-19, is A19, however you want to say it. Same thing. Is we get Kersh in an episode. Oh my god. And that thing of Scully can be saved and Mulder can't.
It's the softer side of Kersh we see as well, because we see he's actively trying to help Scully.
Yeah. Well, he's feeding in. I mean, it's happened a few times over the years. There's been a persistent sense in multiple series that people think she shouldn't be on this assignment. She's too good for the X-Files.
Which she is.
Which she absolutely is. She shouldn't be down there. I mean, Diana Fowley, for the fact that you hate her and the fact that she is incredibly dodgy at this point, is a better fit for the X-Files than Scully is.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Scully is absolutely integral to the quality of the X-Files, given she isn't about to let Mulder get away with any crazy theories. Mm. She will say what she saw based on her understanding of the science. So it's a double-edged sword. But it's interesting, it's good that Kersh, is aware that Scully's wasting her time doing background checks.
Mm.
And he hates Mulder. On the converse, though, Mulder doesn't get a lot to do in this episode, and I think that's fine because Scully-centric is good.
Yeah.
When did Mulder learn computer hacking?
He's been paying a lot of attention to the lone gunman.
Oh, clearly, yes. But it's not again something that you'd think would come up more, but doesn't. The fact he's just got access to Kersh's computer. And it's just reading the field reports as they're coming in.
Yeah.
Well, what? When did this happen? How did this happen?
To be fair, I imagine Langley could hook him up quite nicely.
I imagine he could, but I also imagine that when the FBI figures out this is happening, that someone is going to be fired. Not Mulder, of course, because somehow he's still going. But it's interesting to see Kersh in this role. Again, it feels odd that Kersh then just vanishes from the plot. And
Yeah,
Mulder
true.
is allowed to do a lot of investigation on what he keeps calling an X-file on Kersh's time, which really be how he does things. I do like the phone conversation between Mulder and Scully, though, when Mulder keeps referring to it as an X-file, and he is correct, of course, but he's right from the start, and then Scully sort of disputes it at first, and then, like, halfway through the episode, she stops correcting him because she can't deny it anymore.
I like it when Mulder's first impression is Mulder doesn't hear any further than the word photography, I think, and starts then citing every kind of belief about, like, cameras stealing people's souls and things like that.
Yeah, and telekinesis or thought, killing people by your sense of thought and things, yeah. I thought that was quite funny. It's like, yeah, this is why you're not respected, Mulder, because you've leapt so far. You're right, it's an X-file, but it's not that kind of X-file.
You've got to wonder if Mulder does it on other cases too. Like, he's investigating a heroin ring and he's kind of pulling out some kind of, like, supernatural theories about heroin or something like that.
I can only believe. I mean, this again is the Extraterrestrial's Guide to the X-Files book. Is kind of that's one of their points in it is you see the ones televised, which are the sort of prestigious cases, or the ones that actually do have supernatural, and then there's everything else surrounding that where Mulder is just saying crackpot things.
Yeah.
Like, Dodd Calm was the one where we sort of saying, what does Scully think when she comes into the office in the morning and he starts talking about wormholes?
Yeah.
It's a Scandinavian ship, Mulder. What are you talking about?
Well, we all imagine now that Mulder's attitude is much like Bad Blood with his slides of castle mutilations.
Yes, I mean, we don't understand how he does that. I mean, what's he like as a background check guy? Because he doesn't seem to do anything. He seems to be able to run off and do whatever he wants, regardless of what his job should be. Because, okay, when he was doing it on the X-Files, that was pushing credibility. Because we've discussed this before, if senators actually found out that Fox Mulder was a real person on the government time, investigating what he's investigating, the X-Files would be shut down.
I'm sorry, you're paying him to investigate werewolves?
Exactly. And this is kind of like what the end did kind of imply. However, the X-Files are then reopened and given to Spender and Fowley. So quite already one said, no, shut them down, reassign them somewhere else. These are unclassified reports. Leave them alone.
Yeah.
Again, we wouldn't have a TV series, but it's weird to reflect on it. Is Peyton Ritter one of the blandest FBI agents we've ever seen?
He is going back to what we originally pointed out with the X-Files as well, is that there's this lean you see often when they're dealing with local sheriffs, that they have no interest in investigation, they just want to catch the guy.
Yes, and he exemplifies that because he's decided Felic is guilty, despite the fact that, no, some of those were murders, some of them were suicides. He cannot possibly have done them.
There is clearly something weird going on, but you can't look at this guy who, say, died of a stroke.
Yeah.
And say, yep, it's clearly the same MO as that guy over there who was shot.
Yeah. And then when the guy who stabs Felic comes in and says he saw him stab him, and Scully sort of says, really? The multiple murder, you're going to believe him over this photographer?
Yeah. Elderly photographer.
Who's like twice his age and has multiple stab wounds in his back. And his blood, it's all over the floor of the crime scene. You're going to believe the guy who stabbed him.
But again, it's that kind of deep critique of law enforcement who are more interested in getting the glory for closing a case.
Yes.
Than they are actually investigating and figuring out what actually happened.
Yes, it's the quickest, simplest solution that you can conjecture a theory around. Anything that doesn't fit can be discarded. A friend of mine did point this out in real life, because there was a mystery thing, like 10 years ago, there was a mystery death in a French village or something.
Okay.
And it felt like an actual murder mystery thing, and it was resolved within a few days.
Mm.
But his point was, the point he made to me, though, was in real life, all evidence doesn't necessarily fit together into a clean jigsaw. You will always get stuff that doesn't fit or stuff that contradicts other bits.
Mm.
And if to do this in the ideal possible world, you have to take the majority implication of everything and accept that not everything's going to point in the right direction. You are going to get some inconsistencies. Memory is fallible. People will say the wrong thing or things happen in the wrong order, and you don't have anyone else to contradict that statement.
Well, in my own personal experience, my eye-opening things is I did jury service once. And it wasn't a murder, it was for a trying to bust a drug ring, essentially what it was. But you realise that how, in a crime procedural, all evidence looks solid. It's like, but one of the evidences they had in my case was a telephone recording. And they got an expert on recognising, voice matches and things like that in, and they said, yep, I'm 60% certain that's the guy. And you think, if you're the expert, can you not get better than this? If this was a movie, you'd say that's definitely his voice.
Yeah. I mean, that's only slightly better than a coin flip. That's really
it just goes to show how evidence is never as solid as you think it should be.
Yeah. This one, at least, episode does give you the good impression of he's decided that Felix is guilty because they can put him at the crime scenes. They can't explain how he's doing it, but that's not something they're really worried about.
Mm.
And, they're going to compel someone who's willing to sort of say, oh, yes, I didn't murder that person, this other guy did, who happened, we know was there at the same time.
Interestingly, I should have brought it up in SR819, but X-Files likes to throw around diplomatic immunity.
Oh, yes, we'll get into diplomatic.
Yeah, I researched what that meant the other day, because it came up in SR819 for the Tunisian where Skinner said we can't touch him, he's got his diplomatic papers. It's technically true.
It's one of these things we want to say, how do spies ever get captured?
Right, it's the checks and balances. So what you've got is, you've caught your guy, he's got diplomatic immunity. It's a scale. So if he is low rung, that basically isn't worth the paper it's written on. If he's got top tier, which is very, very rare, he can get away with anything, basically. He can, murder, he can use drugs, he can do whatever he's wanting to do on there. The thing is, if the crime is not connected to why he's in the country in any way, it still kind of goes to the law enforcement, and they've basically got to contact the country he's from, at which point they will ask, can we this guy's just ran a car through a mall and killed a bunch of people, can we prosecute him? And the country can say, no, you can't. But in the event they do that, let's say America still has the option to kind of exile him back to his home country and revoke any visas so he can never come back to the US again.
Okay.
So there are checks and balances. It's not just that they can run free and murder without consequence.
I mean, it just feels like you see it come up in films every now and again, and that's a better explanation than you normally get. Thank you. At the same time, you want to say, I'm sure this was done for a good reason at some point in time, and I can see in, like, if you're a diplomat to a country that's actively hostile to your country, I understand why this is here. On the other hand, it feels so ripe for abuse that you probably shouldn't do it.
My studies showed it's actually incredibly common to be granted diplomatic immunity, especially in America, but you're more likely to have one of these lower tiers where it doesn't give you as many benefits.
That makes
You're
more sense.
very unlikely to have full diplomatic immunity.
Yeah. But again, it feels like this is a cheat code in a video game.
Mm.
It's like Grand Theft Auto where the police can't arrest you for some reason or something.
Yeah, but there you go. I should have mentioned that in SR819, but that is diplomatic immunity as defined because it keeps coming up in the X-Files.
Do we have much else for this episode?
No, I don't think so. It's a very, very good episode, Tithonus. I'd say it's probably been one of the best ones of the season so far.
Well, we've hit a nice little run. We ignored SR819 and just pretend that didn't happen. Actually, no, we've got the dates, because I've got a thing about the dates, so if you want to...
the date that Ritter mentions, I think, in their interview with Fellig in this one is 4th of January.
So this happens before the sting of Rain King by implication.
So technically this entire episode should happen before Rain King Or a full year after it.
Yeah. I did actually come up with, while I was putting the last episode together, there is a possible explanation for ranking, and it works, but they needed to say it.
Okay.
Because it actually solves all the problems with ranking if they say one thing.
What?
Well, this is a flashback. This episode happened in season 5.
Okay.
We're just showing it to you now.
Yeah, alright, yeah.
They don't, but that would have resolved every single one of my issues with it.
You do it as a fond remembrance back. Start it in present day on Valentine's Day and remembering back to a previous Valentine's Day.
Yeah, that kind of thing. If you'd done something like that, that would have resolved the issue. I mean, I don't want to critique ranking too much because I did enjoy it, but it still doesn't make sense of where it's placed. Much like this one, is the dates have gone weird. Or someone was paying attention and said, okay, we're a year later. This is 2001.
Well, I think it's twofold. What do we say? Ranking happened around August time, which means SR 819 has happened sometime in the latter half of the year.
Yep.
And nothing else important has happened today at any other point.
Nope. And we've skipped over Christmas, skipped over New Year. We've skipped over the Millennium, which is doubly weird because we know there's a Millennium episode coming up, which is not only about the switch over from 1999 to 2000.
I think that's even next season, isn't it? Yeah.
It's not only about, the new Millennium as we understand it, it's the crossover with Millennium. So this episode, by implication, is in 2001. We've just blasted past. If you haven't got anything else, though, we shall call it for the day.
Yeah, I think that's everything.
So next week, we've been looking forward to this one as well, and not for the right reasons. So we have the episode Two Fathers and the other episode of One Son. So if you'd like to get hold of us and defend Two Fathers, One Son, or what was it? Or How They Go So Christmas, or anything.
Or SR 819.
Yeah, give us a robust defense of SR 819. Our email address is thingsargettingstrange42@gmail.com.
You can also find us on social media. On Twitter and Tumblr, we are GetStrange42. On Mastodon, we are at GetStrange42 at universedon.com. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast. Alternatively, and if you're not sick of my voice right now, you can also watch my stream on Twitch TV. The name is AdverseCamber42. That's live Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 PM GMT or Saturdays at 5 PM GMT, where I just chat while I play whatever I've currently got on the go on the PlayStation 5. It's currently Yakuza Like a Dragon, and if you want to catch up on past episodes, I also have a YouTube channel under the same name.
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsargettingstrange, where you can find our Let's Play of the first X-Files game, the PSX one, as we play the Craig Wilmore simulator.
You've adopted that now.
I'm adopting that one now because it starts with Mulder and Scully, and then Mulder and Scully evaporate a bit from the plot, and we're left with some guy in Seattle. And all the other people in Seattle, and occasionally Mr. X, who might have murdered us twice, a few times. And we got arrested a few times as well. And shot.
Yeah, I definitely got shot
We've
once.
been killed a lot of times in this game.
Yep.
So you can find that. You'll get these episodes 2 days early. And you can find our review of Mulder and Scully by Catatonia there, as we sort of try to review that. And any of our future non-TV, non-film X-Files malarkey and ephemera.
So you mean by that the books, the comics, possibly the old games if we can get hold of them?
Yep.
Oh, and the PS2 game.
And the PS2 game, we will get to Resist or Serve. Our theme music is Envision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening. Until next time, please remember,
Don't look, close your eyes.